Knitting techniques. How to bind off in pattern. Left-handed. To download a guide with our 5 favorite tips to improve your knitting right now, visit newstitchaday.com/5knittips. For this tutorial, you'll need the following materials: a pair of knitting needles, and a ball of yarn. Special thanks to our sponsor Lion Brand for providing today's yarn. Today we are using their Lion's Pride Woolspun, available exclusively at Michael's Craft Stores and lionbrand.com, in the color Taupe. When we come to the end of our work, we are going to do what we call binding off, and that's a way of closing off these stitches so that they don't unravel when you're actually wearing the garment that you've created or whatever the project is that you've finished. Now, the traditional way of binding off can sometimes create sort of a little bit wider or looser edge that's not as desirable for textured fabrics like this 1x1 ribbing. So there's a way to bind off actually in the pattern, which will give you a cleaner looking edge, and it will provide a little bit of the stretch that you need in a fabric like this, with still giving it some structure. And the great thing about binding off in pattern is that it's not just limited to things like 1x1 rib. You can actually bind off in pattern for any pattern that you're working. So let me show you how we do this. So binding off in pattern is actually pretty simple. Instead of just doing knit stitches for all of the stitches as we bind off, we're going to work them in pattern. So where there is a purl stitch, we will purl it, and where there's a knit stitch, we will knit it. And you can tell that by the stitch below. This little purl bump and this whole row of them is a purl stitch, whereas this knit stitch, where we can see sort of those little V's or arrows, is going to be a knit stitch. And this is going to work just like a normal bind off if you have done a traditional knit bind off. In this case, I've got a selvage edge, which would be a purl stitch, so we're going to start with the purl stitch, but you'll want to read your fabric so that you know what it is that you're doing. And this bind off again will work for any pattern that you're working that's not lace. Lace, you might not be able to do exactly the pattern that is in the fabric. Alright, so we're going to purl this first stitch. Alright, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit the next stitch. And then I'm just going to pass the first stitch over the second stitch. Now, on the next stitch, I'm going to purl the stitch, and then we'll pass the first stitch over the second stitch. Alright, it's as simple as that. So we'll continue knitting the stitch and passing it over, and then purling the stitch and passing it over. And you'll be able to do this again for any combination of stitches. So if you had a 2x2 rib or a 1x3 rib, you can do the same exact thing. This is just going to make the bind off edge a little bit nicer. So that's how we bind off in pattern.
Hey, I'm Johnny Vasquez, founder of New Stitch a Day and your teacher for this tutorial. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to learn from us. If you'd like to see more videos just like this, we produce new content every single day, hence New Stitch a Day. You can click the subscribe button so that you don't miss a single stitch. And if you click one of the links to the side here, you can see the previous stitch in our series or the next stitch in our series. And if you click this link, you'll be able to see one of my favorites. And don't forget, you can also download a PDF with the written instructions for this tutorial by clicking or using the URL link that's on the screen. Again, I want to thank you so much for learning with us, and I hope that we've helped make your knitting and crochet skills a little bit better today. Yarn on!